Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Realtor Reacts. Today we are going to be visiting with our old friend, the village's chief. It's chief, not chef. We've got that cleared up. All right, now, my first 6 months in the village's Florida. I've been going back and forth with myself on this. Um, should I do my first 15 years in the village's Florida? You think anybody would watch that? Probably not. You got to have fun with it, though. Okay, so I have not pre-screened this at all. It is 19 minutes and 42 seconds in its length. I'm pretty much giving up on the notion of doing this in under 30 minutes. The core videos, even when I get it down around 10, 14 minutes, I just have too much to say. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in here. I've been wanting desperately to get back to Village's Chief for another episode here on Realtor React. So let's hop right in.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking in. So I moved here in September of 2022. Now it's March of 2023 at the time of this recording. So I thought I would do a 6-month review of my opinion and experience of living here in the villages. I'm not going to talk about the house. I got a couple videos about that and a couple more coming. This is more about the overall vibe of living here in the villages and my thoughts on it so far. So one of the things I really love about the villages is the cleanliness, the orderliness of everything. All the common areas are beautifully kept and maintained. All the landscaping around here is gorgeous. The Villages really does a good job from the north to the south. It is really beautiful no matter where you live in the Villages. All the neighborhoods are really nice and clean. 99.9% of the neighbors really take a lot of pride in their yard and landscaping and the exterior of their homes. So there's a lot of pride here in how nice and clean that we keep the villages. When you're driving down the roads, you don't see pollution or trash on the side of the roads or anything like that. I mean, occasionally you might, but usually it gets picked up right away. It's really pretty around here. I think that's one of my favorite things about the villages. It's how nicely landscaped, manicured everything is. All the intersections have flowers, the palm trees around here are gorgeous. The way they designed the layout of the community flows really beautiful from one end to the other. And it's just a real lovely place to walk around, drive around, and experience how nice and clean and orderly it is. So that's one of my favorite things. Obviously, I love the weather here in Florida, especially here in Central Florida. The week I moved here, Hurricane Ian rolled in, and we were fortunate enough here in the villages to not receive too much damage, at least that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any homes that were, damaged or destroyed here. I don't think there were any. If there were, my heart goes out to you. But I think because of our central location, we were pretty fortunate. So other than that, it's sunny and beautiful all the time. And I know it gets hot here in the summer. My lifestyle visit was here in the summer in July of 2022. But I love the heat. One of the reasons I moved down here is because I look forward to those hot summers. Now, I know a lot of people think I'm crazy, but I prefer the heat. I could live in the.
So let me hop in here for a couple quick points. Pride in ownership and pride in the community. It's very much a key factor in why the Villages has been so successful as a community. It was never from its very inception, right, through its reimagining in the early 90s. Pride and ownership in the Villages has never really been something that has to be pushed. It's a destination community. Folks love being here, and thus that reflects. One of the things that you will oftentimes hear me speak on, as a matter of mathematics, is the value proposition not only of the villages but of the investment potential and stability of the villages. And the pride and ownership has a major influence on that. My owners understand, my residents understand, and pay without complaint most of the time the necessary fees and costs to keep the community beautiful, because that ties directly into their home values. Um, And once that became a fairly common understanding, there wasn't much in the way of objections going forward. So, and that's, like I said, that's pretty much been there definitely since the reimagination of the community in the early 90s. Um, Adverse weather and why Central Florida is kind of in a sweet spot, right? I get a lot of folks who will come in and they'll have a strong preference towards block and stucco, and that block and stucco preference really ties into their risk mitigation or their desire to do risk mitigation as it pertains to wind events, right? Whether it be a tornado or a hurricane, excuse me. And, obviously, tornadic activity can vary widely in its intensity. I don't care what kind of structure you have around you, short of, a bunker underground. Um, no matter what we build, a severe enough tornado is going to tear it up and knock it down. So there's that to be considered. I don't think we've ever had one of that magnitude before. Hurricanes are a different animal and they're more frequent. Um, and obviously, we have a lot of lead up time with those to make preparations and possibly get out of the way. And as far as I know, in the time that I've been here, we've never had a mandatory evacuation. I've gone through numerous hurricanes in the villages at this point. Um, Damage is usually fairly minuscule. I'm not saying not to do risk mitigation. I'm not saying not to get the proper level of insurance for your comfort level. But historically, hurricanes have had challenging times touching us in any kind of significant way. Um, the only one that I remember downing power lines and some trees was quite a while ago. And this was an interesting thing because sometimes you can get an opportunity out of adversity, right? And this was an opportunity for me to discover just how well organized the response team is to a natural disaster here in Sumter County and in the villages, right? There was some damage. There was some impediment of free flowing traffic. I believe it was on 466. I'm specifically remembering here. And but I'll tell you what, within 2 days, you would not have known a hurricane came through at all. Within a week, everything was back up and running. Power lossage was minimal in terms of the downtime, not in terms of the volume of homes affected by power lossage, but the period of time where those power lines were downed. Very minimal. When I have a hurricane coming in, I really don't get too antsy about it. I take necessary precautions. I'm probably over cautious as a human being, anyways. Um, and it's usually I've had more severe thunderstorms in a lot of cases. So that's kind of the hurricane outlook there. Heat, yeah, it gets hot. It can get hot in Central Florida. I was out doing some yard work at my brother's place not that long ago, and it was up around 94, 97. I jumped in my car and it said 102. I said, "Good Lord, I didn't know that number could go that high." It can go that high. I was out there for maybe 20 minutes, and I came back with quite the sunburn. But I'm very fair skinned, so that happens. Yeah, it can get hot. It can also get cold, right? Folks say, "Oh, Florida doesn't have seasons." No, we have seasons. We just don't have trees that reflect those seasons as much. The weather here as of late, in the last, I would say, probably 8 years, um, really has shown more notable swings throughout the seasons than in years past. Let's jump back in here.
Desert. This is just something that I love about Florida. I like the kind of tropical feel. The winters here are unbelievably nice. This is my first winter here, and it is just perfect weather. It's probably in the 70s and 80s most of the time, and sunny. I can't believe how nice it is here. So obviously the weather is one of the great factors about living here, and I imagine that's probably one of the biggest draws of moving to Florida. Location is amazing. We're about an hour and a half or an hour from Orlando, about an hour drive to the airport, something like that, hour 20 minutes. Disneyland is like an hour and a half away. You know, you can get to the Nature Coast and the Gulf in about an hour. You can get to Daytona in about an hour. The really nice high-end beaches are about an hour and a half, 2 hours away. I really like Longboat Key, Sarasota area. Siesta Key Beach is, I don't know, 2.5 hours, 2 hours away. And that's, you know, one of the highest rated beaches in the world. So it's a really cool location. You get to a lot of cool stuff here from the villages. I really love the active lifestyle here in the villages. If you're bored in the villages, it's 100% your fault. There is a million things to do in the villages. I'm surprised at how affordable the amenity fee here is. And no matter what part you live, it's going to be, I believe, under $200 for your amenity fees, depending on when you buy. I think they're all under $200, which is a bargain. But you get so much for that. The rec centers here are great. You have a wide variety of pools, and every neighborhood is close to a rec center and a pool, no matter where you live in the villages. And there's several different types of pools. I like that they have separate family pools, adult pools, athletic, aquatic sports pools. So I think they did that really smart. There's pickleball courts everywhere. There's tennis courts everywhere. It's really fulfilling to live here if you're an active person. The multimodal paths, which are for golf carts, road bikes, and pedestrian traffic, are really nice, and they're all over the place here in the villages, and I use them all the time. I love taking my trail bike from my house to Spanish Springs. I used a multimodal path, so I get to stay off of the main roads, and I'll stop along the way and enjoy a nice lake or look at the gators, and it's just wonderful here. So if you like to walk, if you like driving your golf cart,
For a long time now, the Villages has had a reputation for kind of being a fountain of youth. And, you know, I can tell you that in my personal experience, because believe it or not, my job can be somewhat stressful. Um, in my personal experience, there's nothing better than hopping on the bike or going for a walk on a beautiful, fall or winter day, nice 52 to 62 degree weather outside, sun shining, roads are clean, air is fresh and crisp, and just giving yourself space to think, right? And to process and to breathe in a safe environment, a safe, clean environment. Um, I don't know if I could even put a value on that and how much I've come to rely on it and appreciate it and miss it when I don't have access to it. It is one of those things that when I leave the villages, which is very rare that I do that, um, I miss it almost immediately because of these things, right? It's home, and home is very comfortable. And this particular home affords me a lot of room to gather my thoughts and be at peace, or get back to being at peace. Obviously, we live in an era now where mental health has become more and more of a talking subject that we discuss openly. Um, and man, is it invaluable to just have a barometer on that. And the villages, as an environment, as a community, really lends itself to that. Activities, yeah, and the villages is famous for this, right? It's you can really reinvent yourself here. Um, you're coming out of your employment years and your working life, and it's like, well, what am I going to do in retirement? In the villages, the real question is, what are you not going to do? There's so much. It can be a little overwhelming. It can really be a little overwhelming. Um, Generally, with my folks, I recommend that we take a look and see what are our physical capabilities, where do our interests lie. Let's explore those rec centers. I think I mentioned this in a previous video. Let's explore those rec centers. Let's explore those opportunities, and let's see where our natural um, relationship developments occur, right? If we're pursuing our interests and we're happy in the pursuit of those interests, then other people of similar interests are going to start to glob on, right? You're going to start to travel in the same circles. And so you're naturally going to develop connections and friendships here in the community. That's just a byproduct of how the system is set up. Um, but short of that, try things. I didn't think I was going to like shuffleboard. Shuffleboard looked boring, right? Turns out I really enjoy shuffleboard. I didn't think I would, but yeah, bocce. Bocce is incredibly popular, but yeah, I've played table tennis enough, and bocce's kind of a souped up version of table tennis, and I don't know if my hips can do it for much longer. So, um, because of the arthritis, which is I'm sure not uncommon to me. So let's hop back in here.
Around, if you like taking your road bike or trail bike out for a ride, this is the place to do it. And there's nothing steep here, like there's absolutely no mountains or anything like that. So riding a bicycle around here is real easy to do because it's mostly flat. If you're older but you still want to do some cycling, this is a great place for that. I love the squares. So if you know about the villages, you know a big draw here is the several squares that we have, mainly Spanish Springs, Sumter Landing, Brownwood Paddock, Sawgrass Grove, and then a new one being built, Eastport, which is coming in a few years. Everyone's within minutes of a square, which has live entertainment every.
I could be wrong about this, but I don't believe that I am. I don't think Sawgrass is technically considered a square. I think Sawgrass was, if I'm remembering correctly, Sawgrass was more or less an idea about a lifestyle center, a concept of hybridizing multiple facets of the lifestyle in terms of a facility and kind of localizing that into one position. Um, and this is part of the innovation in the community. This kind of goes back to something I was saying in a previous video where it's like the only constant in the villages is change, right? Adaptation. It will evolve. It will improve. And, depending upon your outlook and opinion, maybe it's a detriment, but most folks would agree it's an improvement in trying to be more efficient. Now, unfortunately, there's the motivators behind that aren't necessarily what you as a potential resident would like to hear, but the end result services your lifestyle, and that's what's important. Let's go ahead and jump back in here.
Night, unless it's really crazy weather. There's always something going on in these squares. The third Saturday of every month is this really amazing cruise-in car show at Spanish Springs. All the squares have different activities. It might be arts and crafts or flea market type or all kinds of vendors coming. There's always something going on at one of the squares, and if not, they're just great places to walk around and shop and get some live music. Every night is a party in the villages. Every one of the squares, you'll find people dancing, music playing. Typically, it's oldies mixed in with classic rock, and every now and then you'll get a cool 80s vibe going. But it's really, really good here. So if you like live music, this is the place to live. Some people, they say when you move here, you'll get sick of going to the square and blah, blah, blah. I like going to the square. I go there just about every day because my gym is on the square at Spanish Springs. So I go to the Genesis Health Club on Spanish Springs, get my workout in, and then I'll go park the golf cart somewhere around the square and listen to the band. And that's how I unwind. And then I'll head home. So I have yet to get sick of the music here, and I love seeing people dancing and having fun. It's a really good vibe. So if you like live entertainment, this is the place to be. The Villages is mapped out really good. So you can get anywhere in the Villages in about a half an hour from one end to the other. So no matter where you live in the Villages, you have access to all the amenities and all the squares and all the entertainment. And actually, the squares are open to the public, so anybody can go and enjoy the live music and the restaurants and all that kind of thing we have here in the villages. So no matter where you live in the villages, it's easy to get from point A to point B. Now, you might want to take a car if you're going to the other end of the villages because it might take forever to take your golf cart. You can do it. But for example, if I want to go down to Brownwood, I live up near Spanish Springs. If I want to go down to Brownwood, I'll typically take my car or motorcycle and head down there. Anything up north like Lake Sumter or Spanish Springs, I can do in my golf cart or even take my bicycle. Everything is close by. I'm retired military, so I use the VA clinic. If you're a retired military person, there is a VA clinic here in the villages at the north end. They've taken care of all my needs there without ever having to go to a main hospital. So I'm really impressed with the VA clinic. If you're a military member thinking of moving to the villages, definitely look into that. They might be able to offer you the services you need. So the VA clinic is 5-10 minutes from my house. If you live in the
I like how the Lake Sumter Landing Square has been lumped in with the northern end of the community. Lake Sumter Landing traditionally is considered the central position, but again, different perspectives. The community is growing. These things can be redefined over time. Um, I like what he said about the transportation part, though, because it is absolutely true. From the north end to the very south end would probably take, if you're obeying the road speed limits, would probably take anywhere from 36 to 42 minutes, tip to tip. Um, but nobody's really going to be traveling tip to tip. Um, Generally, like he said, you can access the vast majority of any lifestyle elements in the villages in a motor vehicle, 22 to 25 minutes, 30 minutes on the outside, right? General rule of thumb, you're going to want to double that time, that travel time for a golf car. Okay. And bicycle, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how hard you want to huff it. So it's up to you. I'm sure the chief could probably do it in half the time of the golf car. So I will probably do it in twice the time as the golf car because I'm going to do a lot of coasting. it's just, it just depends on where you're at health wise. Let's hop back in here.
south end of the villages, it might take you a half hour at most to get to the VA clinic. The way the main roads are laid out, there's a lot of roundabouts, and some people hate the roundabouts, some people love them. I like the roundabouts. I think it keeps the flow of traffic. I wish people would go a little slower in there because sometimes it can get pretty hairy with golf carts and vehicles and everybody flying around the circles. So if you're new to the villages, be careful about dealing with the roundabouts, but they do keep the flow of traffic going. The villages is very friendly. It's sometimes referred to as America's friendliest hometown or something like that. And I kind of agree with that. I have not had a negative run with anybody. When you go sit down at the square and enjoy some entertainment or at a restaurant, there's always.
So we did a whole video on traffic not that long ago. I don't know if I shared this story when we did that video, but I'll share it here. I had some customers in the car, and I was transitioning from the north side of the community through Lake Sumter Landing. And off the Lake Sumter Landing's east side, there is a very large roundabout, okay, on Morris. And during season, I'm more cautious because I'm more aware that I have folks in town who are not as well versed in roundabout mechanics, and they don't necessarily instinctively know what to do when they approach a roundabout. So I'm coming in, and I'm on the inside lane. I'm going to be, I'm not going to be turning off immediately on my right. I'm going to be transitioning through and going straight. And I come face to face, bumper to bumper with an oncoming car, right? And when Chief says, I wish people would slow down, this is one of those situations where being cautious when entering and exiting a roundabout is critical, okay? This was very close to being a head-on collision. I was in the correct flow of traffic. This individual thought that they could transition from where they were into the right hand side. Okay, they were going against traffic. They were essentially making a turn incorrectly, and that brought them face to face with me. The challenging part here was I had to then move my vehicle in such a way as to stop the flow of traffic in the roundabout and give them instructions from my window to back up and change their pathing around the roundabout in order to access that road. They can still do it, but they need to go in the proper direction, right? So, is the villages America's friendliest hometown? We really try to be, right? There are those who are more committed to this idea than not. Obviously in that situation, I think this story is a great jumping off point for this because I could have been upset. That could have done serious damage to my vehicle, but I understand. I understand that we're going to make mistakes when we're dealing with things that we're unfamiliar with. Okay. And so, I try to be rational, and I try to be friendly, and I try to give the benefit of the doubt that this was not folks being irresponsible and just trying to go around the rules of the road. This was because they were unfamiliar with how roundabouts function, right? So I didn't yell, right? I stayed very calm. It didn't have anything to do with the fact that I had a customer in the car with me. I would have behaved the same way if that hadn't been the case. But I have seen instances where folks get irritable. And I tell a lot of my buyers, you have to understand, a percentage of my population is considerably older, right? And we are some facet of a party community. You start mixing those medications that we take regularly at this age group with some of the libations that are available, and you can get some unpredictable results from time to time. So, but traditionally, folks are very accommodating. Traditionally, folks are very helpful. We do encourage looking out for our neighbors, and I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. When you're buying in the villages, you're buying community, okay, and you're buying lifestyle, and that's what you're really buying. My houses they really haven't changed that much in the last 30, 40 years. So they're just slight tweaks on, bedroom placement and kitchen layout. So that's I wanted to pop in here with that. When these incidents flare up, please don't take it as a reflection of the community as a whole. Things do happen, right? I do caution you on getting into deep political conversations. That tends to be a little divisive, particularly in the current environment. But beyond that, you should be good to go. Let's hop back in here.
People that'll say hi, or if they're sitting next to you, they'll want to get to know you, which is really friendly. It's really nice around here. Everyone has been positive. All the neighbors have been wonderful. Everywhere I go, it's just people wanting to talk and share and get to know each other in a very nice, casual atmosphere. I'm a positive person. I love optimistic type people, and there's a lot of that here. So, we're all getting close to retirement or at retirement at this point in our lives. Let's just enjoy it. All right, let's move on to the stuff that's not so great. And like I just mentioned, I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I hate getting negative. I don't like being around negativity. I want to be honest with you guys. And also, I'm curious on what you guys think about the good and the bad. So, number one thing to me that I think is not so great is the lack of mountains. My last house was in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I lived actually on top of one of the mountains with views for as far as you could see of the Blue Ridge. Gorgeous sunsets. I miss that. I do miss seeing more terrain than what we have here in Florida, which is pretty much flat as a pancake. So if you're one that has to have mountains, is a little hard to swallow here. There are zero mountains in Florida. Granted, it's a trade-off between living in the mountains and the weather here in Florida. So maybe it's a wash, but I do miss seeing mountains. And being a motorcyclist, I used to love carving through the curvy roads of the Blue Ridge and the beautiful mountain scenic roads at high elevations and stuff like that. So I kind of miss some of that, but I'm getting used to it because the weather here is pretty nice. Another thing that I don't.
Mountains. Got it, Chief. Well, let me make note of that. More mountains. Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, it's Florida. What are you gonna do? But I get it. This is one of those perspective things, right? Because it's like I was driving up. I wasn't driving. I would never drive in these conditions. I'm terrified of heights. But I was in the Pennsylvania mountains on the border of upper New York, upstate New York, and no, I'm good. I'm good. I'll stay with my flat as a pancake, Florida, uh, going forward. All right, let's hop back in. I love that we're at a place where when we're trying to find negatives about the villages, the topography is first and foremost, but it's Chief's perspective, and he's absolutely entitled to that. All right, let's jump back. Let's jump back in for real this time.
Don't like is power lines. Power lines drive me crazy. I know we need them, and I'm grateful that we have electricity in this amazing country, as accessible as electricity is around here. But the power lines really take from the beautiful sunsets and things like that. They're not everywhere, and there's certain spots in the villages where you can drive without seeing them. But if you drive more than 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to run into them. Probably in your neighborhood somewhere, lurking. Sometimes they go right through the golf course. And they're monstrosities. These things are huge, and they're all over Florida. So I guess that's part of living in a state that's flat. That part kind of gets to me because I've always had kind of a angst towards ugly power lines, but I know we need them. I appreciate having the service, and Gridley's starting to go crazy again. I think I better feed him, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Where was I? Let's see. Power lines. All right, we talked about that. Gyms. We got all these beautiful rec centers here all over the villages, and I haven't found one with a good weight room or a weight room. I like to lift weights. I know not everybody else does, but a lot of people do, including older folks. So there is a gym here in Spanish Springs. I know there's one in Brownwood, but they're expensive. I think they're expensive. I'm paying $85 a month for my membership. I mean, I'm glad they have a gym here. I just wish it was part of our amenity fees. And maybe they don't have it in there because obviously it would affect the memberships, and maybe there's some sort of contractual thing or something. I really don't know. I'm just assuming. But it would be nice with all these beautiful rec centers if they would have weights in there, or elliptical machines and that. I'm not talking about the outdoor type, but legitimate indoor weightlifting equipment for those of us that still like to lift weights. At least you can get a gym membership here. The bond. Let's talk about the bond. I can't.
Oh, do we have to talk about the bond again? Okay. Before we do that, let's talk about the gyms. Um, there's. I mean, gyms have never really been part of the lifestyle package. There was a time in a few test scenarios where gyms were built into some rec centers. It didn't really take. There was an additional fee to join those gyms. It was kind of a hybrid amenities fee slash gym fee type situation. The ones that I remember walking through were very minimalist. They served the they served the idea of having a gym, right? You had the basic equipment there to qualify it as a gym. And I'm a bit of a gym rat myself, so not as much recently since I had the back injury, but prior to that, I was in the gym probably 3-4 hours a night, doing my routines, various muscle groups. So I get where Chief is coming from. It really hasn't been a priority. I don't foresee it becoming a huge priority. In the southern sections of the community, I noticed that there was more um, preference given to outdoor gym spaces, more calisthenic type stuff. But that's not really what Chief is talking about. Chief is talking about weight machines and free weights and in a gym environment, in a gym culture, that tends to derive from that. So, and I totally get it. When you're into health and fitness, and it's a major part of your lifestyle, having the proper facilities or the lack thereof can be frustrating. So we're going to talk about the bond. Okay, all right, Chief. Let's do it.
Wrap my brain around a bond. I almost bought a new home here. Same size as this house, same exact price as this house, and it was new. This house is 21 years old, but that new house had a bond on it, and it was like $27,000 or 30 grand. And I thought, what on earth? Why would I do that? Why not just buy an older home and put that bond that money into it and make it the way I want it? Because that new home still didn't have the best of everything in it. It was generic. So, I struggle with that. I still think about it a lot. Should I have bought that new home in the newer neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff? So I don't know. Now, I am thinking if I stay here, buying down in Eastport when it becomes available. And I know that bond's probably going to be off the charts. I don't know. I kind of wish instead of charging a bond, just charge more for the house. It would make more sense. Why is a new house the exact same price as my old house? But then you attach this bond to it. Almost seems like a marketing thing, like, because now obviously they can sell their houses for cheaper, but is it really cheaper if you're paying that bond? And that bond is putting in new facilities and amenities that I get to use, and I didn't have to pay a bond because I bought an older home. I don't know how I feel about that. What do you guys think about it? Is it worth it? I can't say that, because you know what? If it's worth it to you to get the house you want that makes you happy, then it's worth it, right? So I get it. So I don't know. I got to change my paradigm on it. But when I first got here, I was new to the villages, never even heard of the villages before my lifestyle visit. So I'm like, okay, it's kind of shocked me, or sticker shock kind of thing. I says, I'm not paying a bond. It sounded like a tax or something to me. But now that I live here, okay, I kind of go along with it. If it helps the community, I might rethink that if I sell this house and buy a new one. Like I said, I'm thinking Eastport looks pretty interesting. So, and that's going to be ready right about when I'm ready to retire, because I do work from home still. But in a couple years, I'll be ready to retire. Maybe that's the place. I don't know. If I stay here, there's a part of me that still misses the mountains and stuff so much that I might move. I don't know yet. I do love the villages, but I also love areas like Sedona, Arizona, Colorado Springs, Moab, Utah. I love all of those places out there. However, the lifestyle here is unmatched so far. So I would really have to do my homework about that. I don't know how I drifted back onto that subject. What were we talking about? The bond. So I don't know. Maybe those other places have bonds too. I just never heard of it till I came here. So it kind of turned me off a little bit. What do you guys think about that? Another thing I think is,
Okay. Here's the thing, Chief. I totally get where you're coming from. You know, you're far from the first person to be turned off by the bond. Um, you're far from the first person to wrestle with the, do I pay a bond or do I invest in the home? We've had on this channel, we've had a few conversations about this, so I'm not going to go too long-winded on it and continually beat that horse to death. But um, really, this is going to come down to, and what really informs this decision is your location preferences. And, the bond being an influential factor in your decision making. Um, I'll repeat it only this one time, very briefly, right? When you're looking at the bond versus a resale, or new versus pre-owned, um, where there isn't a bond present necessarily, and you're dealing with older inventory, your your calculation on an annual basis over your ownership window and the amount of money that you're going to invest in renovations and replace and repair are going to calculate out pretty darn close. I think what happens a lot of time with the bond is that we see the principal balance and we go, oh my God, I got to pay that. You don't. You pay your portion of it during the time that you own the property, and then it gets passed on to the next owner. It gets, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not assigned. It escapes me at the moment. But I get it. It's a big number. You know, outside of the villages, kind of to the point that he was saying about why don't we just tack it in with the price of the home. Outside of the villages, that's how it's done, right? The bond is not really that crazy or unique of a thing. It's just we're not accustomed to seeing the infrastructure costs and the setup costs of real property set aside like that and defined like that, right? We're used to it being part of the market value, and this is kind of what leads us into this thought process of, well, I got to add the bond on top of the price of the home to really compare apples to apples. I discourage that line of thinking only because it can lead us to some missteps that can be quite costly. Because now we're conflating market value in the bond. Market value increases traditionally and is recoupable upon resale. The bond is a form of taxation that is not recoupable outside of natural growth in your market value. So that's why I exercise caution when we start thinking along these lines. But I certainly understand the back and forth on it. I do hope Villages Chief stays here in the Villages. I understand that there are other attractive options out there, but I really enjoy his content. And if he leaves, I don't have much to say about Utah or Arizona. So I'm being selfish. Let's jump back in.
Kind of strange here is the price variation in homes. Even like, so there's homes here that are under 200,000, and then there are some homes here that are a couple million. Well, I don't see that drastic of a difference in the homes. They're smaller, they're still right next to each other. They call it a view, but it's really a golf course, or there might be a pond behind your house with a neighbor on the across from you on that pond, or a row of houses. So is that a view? I don't know if that's a stunning view to me. That's worth $1 million more for only a couple hundred square more foot of house. So I don't know. I'm not so. There goes Gridley again. Let me take care of Mr. Gridster and I'll be right back again. Okay, we're almost done here. What I was talking about between the houses and the variations and prices between a high-end house and a more affordable house, there's not that dramatic of a difference, I feel, to justify those expenses. However, I don't know. If the oil check comes in and I can buy a $3 million house in their villages, maybe when I see it, it'll change my view and say, oh, it is pretty spectacular. So we'll see.
I really enjoy Chief's perspectives because he touches down on a lot of points that we come up against quite regularly, right? House pricing variance. Why? He really has touched down on it. It has everything to do with the home site orientation and what are the benefits of that, right? So we're talking view, backs to road, backs to a wall. These are things that carry a tangible value. Um, but they also fall very much in the realm of subjectiveness, right? This is a challenge from a realtor perspective too, right? Super designers. I have a classification. It's my own classification. It's not an official classification called super designer, right? A super designer has been enhanced to the nines. It has additional outward structures. Typically, this is pools and bird cages and pergolas and outdoor kitchens and things of this nature, right? And then it's sitting on a golf course. Well, what kind of golf course? Championship or executive? What is the nature of the view, right? Is there a golf cart path directly behind the home, or is it on the opposing side of the golf course, right? All these factors start coming into play that we have to take into consideration when we're pricing a super designer class of home. And then, of course, there's perception of value, right? I could mathematically justify, right, 600, 700, $800,000 on paper. That doesn't mean that you agree with that. That doesn't mean that that view holds that level of value for you, and or that orientation of the home site and how the home sits upon it may not necessarily translate. So so everybody's different in this regard. I've got folks who come from very spacious areas, and then they come to the villages, and it's a planned urban development, and the homes are kind of tightly packed in, and they desperately want to be able to look out their back door and breathe and see something other than their neighbor. Not that their neighbor is a problem; the neighbor is great, probably, but that's just where they're keyed in. I have folks who come from major cities, right, and they're used to being piled on top of each other, and they're used to road noise and trains. Um, so this is already a relief from that environment. Everybody's going to be built a little differently on this. The challenge is trying to figure out where the pricing should land and where the value interpretation is going to be. Um, I highly doubt the chief is going to see the value based on what he's saying of investing in a golf course property. Um, and it can get very subjective when you get into these super designers in terms of pricing. And that oftentimes is why you will see major swings with the same home. This is also why, and I'm glad he brought this up, because this is also why price per square foot doesn't tend to work very well in the villages. You really have to look at the base price of the model, and you have to look at the home site and what that home site is bringing to the equation. And then if there's any views or frontages and all the other considerations that go along with that. You have to be a little specialized in understanding how to price a home in the villages. It's not like other places outside the villages. Um, and it requires you to kind of reprogram your brain and approach it from a different angle. So let's jump back in here. This is going to be an hour-long video. I apologize, but we're hitting a lot of great points. So hopefully we're enjoying and we're getting some value out of this experience. We only got 3 minutes left. Let's see if I can be quiet long enough to get to the end here.
See how that goes. But as for right now, I can't justify the variation in cost there. It's pretty extreme. All right, lastly, I want to talk about outside the bubble. You know, there's a contrast from living inside the villages to when you leave. So we're so used to the orderliness, the cleanliness of everything, the manicured, spotless lawns, common areas and roads and everything, and shopping centers. But when you leave the bubble, it seems a lot less kept up. It seems like there's a sharp contrast between how nice things are in the villages and how the appearance is outside, less kept up and things like that. I'm not knocking any of those neighborhoods. I'm just saying, whenever you don't have rules and regulations on maintaining your properties, they can become dilapidated, or the areas cannot be as kept up as nice. Or the same, we have very strict rules here in the villages that keeps everything pretty. Feels like the second you leave the villages, especially depending on what parts you leave, it all of a sudden looks not as kept up. It would be nice if we had a broader reach to help the surrounding community be nicer and cleaner and more landscaped as nice and all those kind of things. It just feels like the minute you leave the bubble, it just drops off. It's safe and friendly. I'm just saying in the appearance of it. The Villages is a beautiful place. All right, so to sum it up, it's a great place to live. There's lots of stuff to do. It's very friendly. I love living here in the Villages. I haven't made up my mind if I'm going to stay here the rest of my life, but for now, at this point in my life, it's really cool, and I could see why people do stay here the rest of their lives. It is a wonderful place to live. I'm not a realtor. I'm giving you my honest perspective on things and sharing a little bit of my experience here in the Villages. Anyway, thanks for watching, subscribing, liking, sharing, all that good stuff. You guys are great. Take care of each other out there. We'll catch you on the next video. All right, see ya.
I really appreciate Chief. You know, it's. I don't want to say we're kindred spirits, but I think we probably have similar outlooks on a lot of issues, because there seems to be this underlying uh, concern, about taking care of each other and taking care of yourself, and it's important. And I think Chief also kind of shares that opinion. I don't want to put words in the man's mouth. Uh, his life experiences have brought him to his outlooks. So yeah, when you leave the Villages, it is a sharp contrast, and it's kind of interesting because here as of late we've been debating with ourselves as a country, right? It's like, more control means more consistency, which means a higher grade of quality, better efficiency, right? But you trade off freedom, right? When you have freedom, you have inconsistent results. Um, Chief's point of possibly, extending the reach of the Villages to influence the outside areas around the Villages, um, that would be infringement. That would be infringing upon their freedoms and how their communities are set up. The Villages was set up to be what it is. So I hear folks complain from time to time about the level of deed restrictions and the enforcement thereof, or the lack thereof. So there's always going to be a balancing act between preserving and producing a quality lifestyle and a quality community, and then allowing the residents there within to exercise freedoms to the extent that it's possible without compromising the community as a whole. It's always a challenge to try and balance those two elements, and it always will be. This has been Realtor Reacts. This has been the Village's Chief. I'm going to keep saying it so I lock it in my brain. This has been a good time. Again, I realize these videos go a little long. I apologize for that, but I don't want to miss these opportunities to touch down on some of these points. That's the whole reason we do Realtor Reacts. So thanks for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the time spent, and look forward to seeing you back on the next video. Take care of yourself. Take care of others that you care for. Um, And man, just get to the villages if you're not already here, even if it's just for a visit. Come and play. Come have a good time. Be careful with the roundabouts. Have a great day.